Hello and welcome to yet another amazing episode of the MetaRoy Podcast, where every week we give you the simplified version of the hottest topics and the developments in the Web3 space. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube or the podcast platform on which you're listening it on, and leave us a review if you like this show. So today on our podcast, we have Mike Benzaken of Citizen Warrior Foundation with us in the house. Mike, thank you for joining us on this podcast, and it's my absolute pleasure to welcome you here today. How's it going?
A pleasure is mutual, Roy. It's going well. It's a bit chaotic at the moment. I've just moved after 7+ years from a lap of luxury to a temporary waiting station as a result of the Celsius network taking everyone's net worth and or too many people's net worth, which we're fighting on. But aside from that, things are beautiful. You know, the sun is out. Had my workout this morning, and the markets are still there, and we're gonna keep it that way.
Can you just, for our audience, can you give us a brief introduction about who you are and what you do and what your background has been like? Can you share that with our audience?
Love to. So my education was in behavioral neuroscience. I wanted to know what made people tick. I loved game theory. I love the idea of commerce. I love the idea of when do you put your zero or your one out, right? What are indicators, right, that you're likely to have a successful transaction with another party? And then kind of taken out to its extremes, how does that look at from a systems level, right? How can you automate that algorithmically? How can you program that for the optimal outcome? So yeah, and the interesting thing about blockchain and smart contracts is it's going to fundamentally change game theory as we know. But anyway, these are exciting things. So my background is I went into sales. Everyone starts in sales after college. You got to start in sales. Unless you're an engineer, in which case go to the top school or just go straight into development. Don't even go to school. And
I was an engineer. I started with engineering, computer science, but later moved to marketing. So that's about me.
from engineering, which is very interesting because now you have both
Yeah,
temperaments,
yeah,
right? So you have the people
exactly.
and you have the thing, right?
Exactly.
Which all teams need that harmony. Okay, so yeah, I became eventually international business developer for a life science company. Then became CEO and then chair of the company SME, couple hundred employees around the world, focused on working with the UN, foreign ministries of health, specifically foreign disaster relief. We were very good in response. Some econ dev as well. During that time, I become very familiar with decision makers at the level of the nation state, and they had expressed, let's say, worries with me. That's funny because you never think that they would, because people always think that they're looking just to extract and waste and so on and so forth with the size of the government. But no, so USAID, for example, this is the best kind of segue into what got me to emerging tech. They send 1% of US GDP, which is the most, given our GDP, the most generous amount in the world, to go out to two areas: foreign disaster relief, number one, and number two is economic development. So let's just call it 50-50 split. So as we were serving these contracts, and we were good at getting goods into areas that other people couldn't. So they sort of depended on us. We were fancy like that, right? We were sneaky. We knew how to get around stuff, which was very good for them. Anyway, we had realized that roughly 25 cents and then figure 15-point margin on there on every dollar was being received. So a dollar goes over, but we had figured out that it was roughly 50 cents that was being received after the margin through NGOs to the intended recipient of the goods or the services. And so we go and we're speaking. So I have my friends who led these programs at the Hill, and I'm like, yeah, did you realize that? So I mean, we can help twice the people, or we can cut half the taxpayer burden. What's the deal, guys? And they're like, it's actually 25 cents, not 35 cents on a dollar. Like, it's even worse. So yeah, anyway, long story short, the whole Uyghur thing came out because we had like 135 factories we work with around the Shenzhen area. And I wanted to reorient the supply chain. The other shareholders weren't, thrilled about it. So we had a bit of a divorce. I sold my position within the company, learned traditional, TradFi, learned a bit of trading on my own. And like that, did some mentorship and coaching for executives. So took that capital, deployed it, 3x'd it, so I did pretty well. And then I moved it over to emerging tech. I had some problems with traditional banks along the way. I had a friend, someone this was during the COVID lockdowns, who was meeting with political dynasties, like family members of political who have a real voice. And they were against, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but the efficacy of this, the deployment of that, the unilateral governance of this guy and that guy and that guy. And so, lo and behold, what happened was they received this letter from Business Insider saying, "Oh, tell us," and this is relevant. "How do you feel about your PayPal account getting frozen?" He's like, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" So he was crowdsourcing using PayPal, right, for this it was decentralized documentaries. So it wasn't Interpol, but it was some authoritative body shut down his PayPal account without cause. It never got reinstated. Then 6 months later, or 6 weeks later, or thereabouts, my PayPal account, and there was no legal or public affiliation between us because we had been working, you know, people weren't valuing dissent when it came to the mainstream message on COVID. They weren't like propping up dissent, saying, "Oh, you are the bastion of freedom of speech. More people should listen to you." No, it was sort of the opposite of that, right? You remember those times. Anyway, so he says, "Okay, now my PayPal account is shut down without cause." Weird. Why would that happen? Then a prime bank in the U.S., say the prime bank that runs Manhattan, actually, says, "Because of our affiliation with PayPal, who shut you down without cause, we're going to take the largest credit line you built throughout your life, despite never missing a bill, and just shut it down. And yeah, we'll destroy your credit score. We'll limit your ability to be able to get loans and so on and so forth. But it's we can do that because we're a private company, right? Because build your own, right? It's a private company, right? Build your own. It's a private company. So without cause for him, shut down. And then how did they figure it out? No idea. Without cause, PayPal. Without cause, Prime Bank. Wrecked. So where am I now? I go into safe haven assets that are outside of fiat. I went down the whole "what is money" hole. That hole that we all go to after reading the white paper of Satoshi. So this was 2 years after I sold my position. So around 2020, called 2020. Called 2020. Yeah, and so we were starting this bull market. Everyone was FOMOing in, and it was all very exciting. And then we saw all these macros come into play, and we're like, crap. With the current monetary policy, just the whole Bretton Woods system, and then since '71, breaking from the gold standard. And then we saw all these central banks. It looked like they were going to default in the repo market. Everything. We're like, oh shoot, something is going to happen. And we're definitely in inflation, and this guy's not going to stop printing money and virtue signaling to the world. So we better hedge somehow. But we don't know what's going to happen with the equities market because we know that the Fed pumped it up, and now what are they doing? So we're uncertain. What do? We bought stable coins, algorithmically backed stable coins, put it in a high interest yielding account that it was a CFI, lending and custodial company. So the biggest ones incorporating the States: Celsius, Voyager, and you can say BlockFi, right? Outside of like an IRA of a custodial lending account, right? And so there was sort of this assumption that they were all doing the right play, like every U.S. citizen, because we were limited. We couldn't do Nexo at the time. We couldn't do Vauld at the time, right? Vault, by the way, which is Chapter 11. Voyager right now is a Chapter 11. Celsius Network, which is now trying to claw its way back out of Chapter 11, which we're playing a role in, and Three Arrow Capital. It's a different nature, different kind, but still, it's substantial. Like all these companies just overnight when there was a rapid drawdown. So anyway, that brought me up to taking a nonprofit I had, dressing it up under a 501c3, turning it into a private foundation. So you can have people who essentially are long-term vested interest in emergent tech because they believe in its ethos, blockchain, and decentralization of stuff, right? But the idea is the checks and balances against institutions who hierarchies have become overly stiff and who become relatively corrupt, and without there being an opt-out system or say a system that provides a parallel checks and balances against the institutions, then meaningless suffering is going to continue and pick up pace. And if you look at the recent UN numbers, they're like 450 million in people in the global south are going to face like food short. It was some one of these terms. It's so Orwellian, which meant they were going to starve to death, essentially, right? I'm like, dude, just say they're going to starve to death and get over the nonsense, guys, right? Because I know a couple of these guys. Like, come on. And then, but UN's really big too at the same time. So it's like some of them are good and some not so good. But the actual figures are roughly three times that. So unless things change course, this whole energy policy things changes. Um, some of these unilateral NGOs pushed policy in through the European Commission, and that pushed its way out west, which pushes its way out to the global south, and all the economic pressure from the supranationals and the Bretton Woods system on everyone adopting this policy. And now that they're pegged against the dollar, so yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming up. So we are trying to prepare people for that through a variety of measures. So I'm sorry, that was the longest introduction. I totally should have paused like three times there. But now you know everything. So, there we go.
No, absolutely. It gives much more clarity when you know those stories behind the person, right? So uh, let's start with what you're doing right now, which is the Citizen Warrior Foundation. My first question is like, why a foundation? What is the purpose of it, and what are you trying to achieve? And can you just let us know the story behind how you thought about it? What was the motivation behind creating this foundation? Can you talk about all of these aspects? Yeah.
Well, the motivation was okay. So the motivation, I had a nonprofit from the year prior, and we were trying to figure out what the best way to deploy it into emergent tech that would, let's say, secure investors with like a 10-year horizon, 20-year horizon, right? And we just didn't find that niche yet, right? We didn't find that opportunity. Then, lo and behold, there's this huge market drawdown in end of November 21. Huge market drawdown. There was another market drawdown in September. There was a Series B that was raised in Celsius Network in between those drawdowns. And then moving into June, there was a restriction of Celsius Network deposits. So at that point, because of what had happened during the introduction with TradFi, I had lost, a lot of faith. I didn't want to go in the equities market. I wasn't going to buy bonds. I mean, treasuries, like these guys buying bonds and treasuries, it's ridiculous. It's negative interest rates. I mean, anyway, like negative real rates. But so I was okay, yeah, that's where about 4/5 of my wealth was. And I was like, okay, these bastards just restricted my deposit. I understood the restriction move. That was fine because they didn't want to go become insolvent, right? They wanted to prevent another bank run. There was a massive outflow. But then we're like, okay, they're going to move into Chapter 11. So they're trying to restructure, right? They're trying to figure out what to do in between the point of restriction and then filing for something. And then they go to Chapter 11. With Chapter 11, it protects the shareholders and it gives them time. It's not like for you, the customer. Duh. Okay? It's for the shareholders with the vested interest in the company, facing insolvency to restructure ostensibly to get the company out of Chapter 11 and safeguard their investment. Well, that's not necessarily what was happening, but that was the point when they took 4/5 of my crap. When I said, you are taking, because I know from my side, I worked my balls off for that, right? My entire life. I worked my balls off my entire life. And I saved and I made prudent, decisions. I was never wasteful, so on and so. The one thing I wasted on was the penthouse and the thing. That was a waste. Everything else, no waste. Very little waste. Some waste, but very little. Point is, there's no more waste. There's no more waste because it took a lot of crap. So we're like, all right, we're taking it. Citizen Warrior Foundation. What we're going to do is three things. So we applied to the IRS, waiting for our exemption, 501c3 pending. One is to educate the public on how effed up parts of the crypto sphere is, emergent tech is, where the dangers are, and also where the value is, which is important. That's why we have a separate brother affiliate with another entity that essentially talks to the innovators, the real pioneers, the high integrity individuals, the ones who want to raise all boats, if you will, right? The people in it for the right reasons. There's so much crap in the space. So one of us is educate people on the crap, on the villains, on the literal criminals within the space. Because it's done, the crypto sphere as a small portion of emergent tech has done the worst job of any niche that's begging for mass adoption. Just like the most limp-wristed, all these influencers and this and that. Like they find their niche and then they own their niche to get like 100,000 followers and then they do nothing, right? It's like do something or shut up, because honestly, you're just making noise and you're talking about which JPEG you're going to buy and how that's going to be worth $1 billion, during the next market run. I'm like, no, your JPEG is nonsense. You're nonsense. Just get out of here, right? Having been someone who had to deal with a stringent regulatory nature, I know the burden of the government fiat. It's super costly and it destroys a small business and a small to medium-sized business, right? So that's a problem. We are begging to be policed. We are begging for the authoritarian boot on our neck. We are begging for our investments to go to zero because we refuse to say, this guy's doing it right, this guy's doing it wrong, because here are the standards. Now, it's not a centralized figure. I can't enforce this by fiat. But my goodness, before you make an investment, why don't you say, okay, do they know what quality control is? Do they have ISO in place? What have they done in the past? Did they deliver? Who are their advisors? If it's a DAO, are they completely anonymous? Are they in any way accountable? If the answer to all that is no, probably don't play a speculative game because you're probably going to get taken, right? And it's all insider stuff on TG. Everyone who knows how to watch the numbers a little bit better than the average guy are just screwing them out of their money. And that pisses us off, right? So it's just like Celsius Network screwed everybody, and Mashinsky, the principal shareholder, allegedly stole a whole bunch of stuff and allegedly engaged in a whole bunch of criminal activity that we're investigating through our crowdsource page, which you can find at Stop the Sell Off, by the way, at CWF. We want to return back people's crap to them as soon as possible, as much of their crap to them as possible in the form of ETH, Bitcoin, and USDC to avoid all the regulatory nonsense in as timely way as possible and reconcile between all the special interest groups who are fighting amongst themselves, because no one knows how to get along. And like crypto Twitter is like is the modern day virtual hell for getting things done. So if you want to get things done, stay away from crypto Twitter and go anywhere else, and you have a better chance of getting it done. Long story short is we're going to try to help broker that out. The three exempt purposes: education, community organization, relationship building, and research and development into goods and services to mitigate meaningless suffering through supporting emergent technologies. So that's like, the big thing. Some examples would be consumer protection protocols, for example, a standardizing association, right, that's received some form of recognition and it's voluntarily adopted. So let's say if it's a CFI company that, oh my God, is allowed to be incorporated back into the States, or just incorporated in the States from scratch, then they're putting their financials on and people can, let's say, receive signals if it's over leveraged, if things are moving off chain that shouldn't. I mean, transparency, right? That even if it's CFI in digital assets, that it still lives up to the blockchain ethos that started all of this, which is decentralization and democratization by the people for the people. That's it. No more of these vultures.
Absolutely, I agree with you. So essentially, if I understood you correctly, Citizen Warrior Foundation is trying to establish those frameworks which could guide or govern
Consumer.
those protocols or companies which are kind of doing whatever they want to, if I have to put it in strong words, uh, which the current government, or which is kind of outside of the purview of the current government or financial systems. They're kind of operating outside of all of those rules and regulations and checks and balances, and you are trying to install those checks and balances, which from
We want to
what I
install
understood, and
reasonable checks and balances, because if we
reasonable checks and
don't,
balances.
unreasonable, right? Let's say crippling or prohibitory regulatory fiat, all right, is going to be imposed. And what's going to happen? Everyone, United States, all the Web3 guys, they're out, gone, right? Every entrepreneur worth his salt in the Web3 space, gone. All the VC funding wanted to go, back certain projects, dried up like that. And it's as if no one gives an ish. That's the obvious outcome of all this. So it's just like, okay, someone's got to start doing it. So yeah, we're gonna start calling out the people who are like misleading people, the people who are being paid to pump coins, the people who were, there's a lot of there's so many bad actors, but this is not to be bearish on the space, okay? So just as a general, let's say, percentage of the pie, roughly 5 to 10% of the pie is high integrity, the future or the building blocks of what will become the future of uh, cryptocurrency or emerging technologies or life as we know it, the substrate. We won't it be so baked into the pie we won't even really recognize it, but it will lift all boats. It will mitigate meaningless suffering. The rest of it is so much crap that people bother themselves with the waste. It's like just watch sitcoms all day and then give me your money instead. I'll at least put it to good use as opposed to you losing it, and you will have ended up with less heartache because at least you enjoyed the sitcom, right? So we don't put up with crap.
True, true, true.
Yes.
Absolutely. But you said your motivation was to create the Citizen Foundation was to kind of was inspired or kind of forced by Celsius Network's collapse, right?
Yeah.
For people who don't know what Celsius Network's collapse is, I'll just give a like a brief, like a 30-second version of that. So essentially, it was a cryptocurrency lending company that you could basically deposit your crypto assets, Ethereum, Bitcoin, whatever, into a Celsius wallet to earn a percentage yield, and you could take loans, pledging those cryptocurrencies as your security. And as
Right.
of May 2022, I have data around it, so they had lent out around $8 billion. That's 8 billion with a B, and had almost 12 billion in assets under management. So that's a big number in terms of anything within the crypto space, right? What happened was in June 2022, due to extreme market conditions, they indefinitely paused all transfers without any reason. Surprisingly, on June 10th, during his weekly AMA, which is Ask Mashinsky Anything, Alex Mashinsky was the CEO. He denied that they were having problems with clients accessing their funds. And on 13th June, the company paused all withdrawals in order to stabilize liquidity and operations. And I'm quoting this because they cited extreme market conditions, right?
Because you have
So
to quote it
this
to be
is
able to repeat verbatim the amount of ish that popped out of their mouth. That's obviously not true. That's why it had to be quoted. Yes, I understand.
absolutely. But have you analyzed what was the reason behind this
Yeah.
collapse? I know some of the reasons were due to stake ether that they're pegging their Celsius token on and all of that. But can you explain it to our audience in a better way? Like, why did Celsius network collapse?
Okay. Well, okay. So you're asking actually a very big question because there's no way to know for certain at this point. And also, I'm going to restrain myself because there's certain areas within why they collapsed that we don't want to pursue because it wouldn't be in the interest of the deposit. But this is what I can tell you. So first things first is that they incorporated in Delaware, or they were in a Series B. Okay, so they were raising funds. At that time, they were receiving financials. This is right at the end of what we know now was the bull market. So this is around November, and this is before the second market drawdown, which was, I believe, just immediately after, literally, the Series B was run. Now the question is, those financials, did it show that the earnings owed exceeded the monies coming in, right? So at the point where they then went from, I believe it was Tel Aviv, but in Israel, they reincorporated into the state of Delaware. There's like an arbitration clause. A lot of people do that. Delaware's a nice spot, no taxes. And then, but their legal jurisdiction would have technically been likely Hoboken. It would have been a legal argument, right? In New Jersey, right? New Jersey. And now the Chapter 11's in New York, right? And that's for a whole other thing. That should never happen. But they engaged in a series of practices. At the time when they incorporated, the question is, were their 3 months evaluated? The 3 months balance sheet, the full financial, docs, was it evaluated? And if it was, whose oversight missed the fact that it required additional funding now during a recognized bear market, by the way. So you're not going to do a valuation and do a Series C, another raise. Half the valuation of your B. That's not really how these things usually work. You're not going to attract the funds. You're going to try to, but then the shareholders are going to tear each other apart. That's not going to happen. So you can't be dependent on future cash that is unlikely to happen. And also the Bitcoin mining operation, that's again was a speculative play on BTC, still looked like things were going bearish. So there's an argument with the P word, which we're not going to get into, that it was allowed to be incorporated in the States, which, by the way, was the reason why a lot of people invested in that app, specifically versus, let's say, Nexo, which is still publicly solvent, right? So that's one. Two, there were apparently 700 million in realized losses in MakerDAO and WBTC. Yeah, show me where, right? Show me where those losses came from. So we're not going to go beyond that, other than to say that we know some people over at Maker. We know people who reported these realized losses. So there would have been liquidations, or they would have been swapping out for something and taking the loss. None of that was available on chain. We know the Vault and so on. So we're working with blockchain analysts on that. Others was the extraction of huge sums of money leading up to the market turbulent conditions of the principal shareholder, his wife, and some of their executive management. Also, it had to do with just irresponsible play. I mean, the basis price whereby the Bitcoin was at, or their staked Ether was at. Then there was the issue with the Ether, but this would have been more like just bad business decision when it comes down to court than it would be like malfeasance or gross neglect or embezzlement, right? And so there are real crimes that we're not going to say occurred. We're saying that allegedly occurred, and we are crowdsourcing the source documents now and doing the analytics, right, in the blockchain, knowing now that things went off chain, what assets were actually under management at the point of restriction versus at the point of filing versus the nonsense that they allowed in the court. All these decisions that are happening in the court right now, like we're picking them apart, right? At the end of the day, it's simply to gain leverage. So we can show there was 5 points of criminality, minus Mashitsky, by the way, who will go after allegedly, who committed a bunch of crimes, right? But that's after the fact. It's about getting the leverage over the existing shareholders to say, guys, listen, we need to go reorganize. We need to go do X, Y, and Z. And this is how we're going to go do it. And we're going to attract X amount of funding. And you're going to be happy with 200 and this amount of dissolution of the equity. It's going to be a complete rebranding. It's going to be a complete, executive management. All of you guys are out, right? You guys no longer have, you are now furniture. Consider yourself furniture. Sit down and shut up, right? And you let us pursue this, or we're going to pursue criminal action against you for having engaged in a P word or whatever, right? And so that's what we're working on now. So behind the scenes, there are people working. There's a whole bunch of special interest groups going on, representing this niche, that niche, that niche. They're all at each other's throats. Then there's another group that's just noisy and bothering everybody. But yeah, it's made very complicated by the fact that no one can just understand what's going on, because there's an unprecedented. I mean, you can't blame them because some of this is unprecedented, right? But then B, it's like people are finally realizing now that money runs the judicial system, and there's no true equal justice under the law. That's a baloney concept, and there's so many people who are now reaching maturity going through this that it's funny. It's like it's the death of innocence. So they're essentially getting like what they would call like red pilled, but not like partisan. Like it's just like, yeah, man, this is reality, bro. Right? It's like this company who's restructuring to get out of Chapter 11 is actually just allegedly a profitable exit scheme.
Exactly. And just a bit of context around Chapter 11. So that's the
Bankruptcy.
bankruptcy filing that Celsius had filed for on July 13th, 2022. And Mashinsky actually resigned as Celsius CEO on September 27th, allegedly after embezzling funds from Celsius network as well. And the omnibus hearing is scheduled for November 1st. So that is when all the claim pleas will be heard for resolution. That's what I know about the Celsius
Oh
debacle.
yeah,
But
FTX
do
US
you want
press
to
lines the day after, right, Roy? You know,
add?
I mean, we talk about your cosmic coincidences, right? And then you have shareholders dropping off like flies. Like there must be something. They must have COVID 22. Inside Celsius. Well, despite the fact that they're all living apart from each other, that they keep on resigning. So all these coincidences, right? So I would say if there's anyone working at FTX UX who happens to have all the transaction data around the point of these realized losses, or if there are any major shorts that happen, with the 2.5 somewhat billion of Celsius Network's assets that were sitting on their site. We have an area where one can anonymously upload and we can track you transaction data, internal financials, emails, or whatever, right? So I can't stop you from doing that. That's your decision, and that's what you decide to do. Um, we'll use it. So there you go.
Absolutely. And actually, we'll put those links in the description if you are interested in sharing, or you have some inside scoop into those details around what the Celsius network is actually doing. And so anybody who wants to check that out, I'll put the links in the description or the show notes for the podcast. So
Thank you.
I want to talk about more about your foundation. So you
Yes.
essentially mentioned education, uh, community building, and relationship building, right? So can you talk about
Organization
what are
relationship
the
building.
things that you are focusing on and how you're rallying the community towards this cause?
Yeah, so the three exemptions. The other one, just real quick, was R&D to goods and services. Right. So it's a community organization and relationship building. So right now, like, so there's a reorganization of the global financial and geopolitical chessboard, right? So the global financial system and the geopolitical. So there's tectonic plates that are moving. This idea that it's either so yeah, sovereignty has been destroyed. I mean, in a huge way, but also interconnectivity can be very positive insofar that it's people to people, peer to peer, and it's not like a multilateral agreements amongst governments who don't act on behalf of the betterment of their people, right? So what we need to do is to educate people first on the dangers and the upside, on the criminals and on the heroes of the emergent tech space. And we just happen to be right now focused on this very niche area, which has made it hard to build a large following because no one really gives a crap. No, there was like it's like internet money is like, oh, and they lost it, meh. Like no one cares. Like really, no one gives a crap. Like, it's like this small niche and it's uber niche and they all hate each other right now. And they're fighting. It doesn't help anyone. But like yeah, so we're starting. We kind of picked a hard nut to crack, but it was a personal nut, right? So never trust a foundation or a charity, by the way, where the founder doesn't have a vested interest in its outcome, because what they're doing is they're just taking your money and they're doing it under the guise of being virtuous. I hate to break it to you, folks, but everybody has an agenda, and some of that isn't taking your crap. So don't voluntarily give them your crap, right? Just because they say they're going to do something good, make sure they're actually doing something. Anyway, yeah. So that's the education part, right? We want to separate the weed from the chaff. We have to do this because if we don't, people are going to get wrecked by a holes like Celsius Network, right? And we have this problem, right? And it's a huge problem. It's a huge, huge problem. So community organization, relationship building has to do with the interconnectedness. We're not relying on our state departments to form multilateral agreements for us to have incentive to do this here. They're here. The people in America, they're getting their life force extracted from them progressively, increasingly, day over day, in the last couple of years, and it's only going to get worse in the years to follow, likely, or it will remain the same. But just the compounded inflation, what's happening with CPI, so it's going to be bad, guys. It's going to be bad. Europe is going to go through a terrible cold winter. All right, they're going to have an energy crisis despite this new pipeline that Sweden just announced that they had at the same time the Nord Stream thing went right. So they never released the outcome of that investigate, which is interesting. So the idea is this: is that the global South is effed, is effed, right? Just look at. I mean, this is not conspiracy theory, right? So you go look at the side effect of ESG being pushed down by a handful, really one, but a handful. We'll say a couple of supranationals. Some which I know people from there. So this is not again conspiracy theory. Like this is their mindset, and the policy goes to the European Commission and it gets pushed out west, and it's like essentially a social credit score of corporations, and then they start pushing this nonsense, down through, let's say the Bretton Woods system, various supranationals, right, that or governmental agencies who lend out money and stuff like that, and so they start adopting these different policies and their policy positions during the next election cycle, and then they find themselves without energy, and they find themselves with an economy that is just being that has risen out. I mean, it's amazing looking at some of the African nations, right? Just how they were climbing out, and now they're just like descending. Like just look at Sri Lanka, right? I mean, it's the best example, right, that I can think of right now. That's going to happen. That's going to get worse. So again, the UN 450 nice words are going to die to death, and then the sentiment regarding that is that's kind of okay because there's like totally so many poor people in the future from the global south who will be saved as a result. So these 450 million poor people, or like people, vulnerable people, distressed, yeah, they're gonna have access to food super deficiencies, whatever nonsense Orwellian nonsense that they're shoving down people's throats. Essentially, they're gonna not have food, right? They're not gonna have food. Okay, great. But everyone who actually matters, 3x that. It's 1.2 billion. If that plays out, you're talking about four horsemen type crap, right? Like you're really talking about some bad stuff. Mass migration. You're talking about just not good things. Endemic disease because of all this dirtiness and not having access to sanitation. I think becoming pandemic, and then you have a repeat of the damn cycle of what they did last time, which they just tried to essentially use this relatively benign, from what we know now at least, to young people, the productive people in the workforce, right, the ones who are not immunocompromised, from shutting down the companies and effectively redistributing wealth to these behemoths, who, if they are over leveraged, they'll just bail out. So it's like, we need to connect people to make sure that as many people as possible have access to intellectual capital, human capital, and financial capital. Now, of course, we don't believe in handouts, so it's the most industrious people, right? So that's what we talk about: is you find the most capable people, the most driven people. Now, they don't have to be geniuses, but they have to show up every day, and they have to have conviction, and they have to be able to have the right mentality. If they want a handout, they can go to another foundation, because there's a lot of foundations, like, the UN would love to give you a handout. They would love to make you dependent on them, so your life is essentially a living hell. Enjoy that. If you are a productive person and you're looking to get involved, then we connect you with other productive people looking to get involved, so that human capital, intellectual capital connects with financial capital. And what do we have? We have now an opt out into economic disparity, right? Into hopelessness, really. And we have the building, right? Building as opposed to destruction during a time that would otherwise be destructive. Like, the dragon that approaches the field. Seriously. I mean, like, I'm being real right now, right? I mean, it's a metaphor, but, right? I mean, here's the field. We're moving into the fall. The winter's not soon to follow, right? The dragon's already at the field. All right. Don't think otherwise. If you do, you're a schmuck or just like naive. You know what I'm saying? That's it. You're one of those two, or you're lying, right? So you could be one of those three. And so it's there. Do we let it go forward unmitigated? That's a decision that we need to make as individuals, and at those individuals who say, no, we're going to impede it so we can do something, right, to help people. I mean, we're actually like good. If we actually say that we are good people, then and we should have good deeds. Saying you're a good person or thinking you're a good person without good deeds, I mean, you're just an a-hole who knows nothing about yourself. So it's like, okay, the right guys are going to get together, they're going to be connected, and they're going to mitigate harm. And the wrong guys, they're just not going to participate, or they're going to try to shut that down, which is another reason why it's a private foundation versus a charity. Why? Because ESG is a bunch of BS, and it's there to apply from a country far east of here social credit score onto the corporate body, the large corporations, and then the CEOs. They're not making decisions; they're furniture. They're not like large shareholders, guys. Like it's like, oh, all these guys are all corrupt. It's like, no, they're just, number one, scared they're going to be replaced because they're treated like baseball players, and B, like they know their stock is going to be shorted into oblivion if they don't kowtow to this ESG nonsense and put up this like DIE nonsense on their sites, or else they can't get a grant or they can't get a handout or whatever it is. So they have to play along, and these are not bad guys either. Like I know a handful, at least. I mean, I live right across from Midtown downtown. And it's like it's against every fiber of the. So it's like, yeah, like I get it. Like they make bad decisions. I'm not standing up for PayPal, by the way. They can go screw themselves. But what I'm saying is that it's happening on this scale and as unimpeded because of fear. And so, private foundation versus charity allows people who wouldn't otherwise be able to take action due to fear of, this mob, Web 2 corporate press sort of, manifested reprisal to get canceled. You're like, try to cancel me, bro. Try. Like I've seen shit that you don't even believe. Do your worst. That's my domain. I live there, son. Right? So you try. Right? So we're protected from lawfare. We're protected from just about anything. And it gives people the ability to leverage us as an instrument, despite them not being able to make the financial allocation decisions we do. We just say, this is a cause that we believe in, and we're going to go, fight it tooth and nail to make sure this happens. And hopefully the exemption comes in soon. But because it's so, I would say, fringe relative to your standard 501c3, run by a guy who's a little bit more taken by his passions at times, the exemption might come in late. So we have other ways of, getting, funding to make sure that we're operational. But we do hope to have that exemption within the next 6 months. And then we're going to start asking for donations. But until then, it's just like, hold on to your money because you're going to need it. Trust me.
True, true, true. Absolutely. And from what you told me about Celsius specifically, I'm drawing so many parallels to what we have already seen in the past, right? 2008 crisis, Mount Gox crisis, all of these crises is just leading up to what we have seen happening again with the Celsius network, right? Our trust keeps on getting broken and broken again and again, and Satoshi's vision makes so much more sense now, right? You love Bitcoin, right? I'm sure you agree with me. In terms of people who have been affected by Celsius's network, and right now the hearing is coming up, right? So what would you suggest? What are the resources that they should prepare with? What are the ways that they can learn about how to get their money back? Can you suggest some
Yeah,
ways
sure,
that they
sure,
can
sure.
learn about this?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, follow Straighto. Straighto, they aggregate all the motions that are being entertained by the court. Um, and is it the judge that recently released everyone's holdings? I mean, I don't know. Did Celsius Network? Did they? So whatever. What happened was everyone's holdings by their legal name and all the coins that were held. And if there's a little check mark or not, which means that they were loaned out against some of that was collateral. That was released, and then somebody else who we've identified, by the way, will be making public in short time. Then put it on Namecheap. Hosted this domain on Namecheap, and then really broke it down so you could really have direct access to completely infringe on your neighbor's privacy. So in case you really wanted to know, you know, how badly your neighbor got screwed, ready access is there for you. It's still up, I think, but it's going up and down. Anyway, that's a huge breach of the Fourth Amendment, and that's a constitutional issue that should be taken up uh, by the right party. So you're saying, what can they do? Number one, check what their holdings should have been against what's being reported publicly against your name. So just go up, look your name up, and say, is this what I had? And it might be tough, right? Because what we know that we're taking stuff now off chain, right? So what do you have to do? Go link it up to like one of these like coin linker type things, or like the things for the taxes. Find out every transaction inflow outflow, and then see what's in there, and then peg it against what's now publicly available for everyone to see. Again, I want to know how that happened. So if you know exactly, let us know on DM us on Twitter. Avoid Twitter if you can. Email us, but if you're on the Twitter, do that because we want to know really what happened there, and that's still kind of confusing. So that's one thing you can do is pair up the assets that are due versus what you have. Another thing you can do is soon there's going to be a tax. Well, right now there's a tax issue, a really strong tax issue that's happening. So where your gains in 21 and you were on an extension now due, and now federally you can offset that. So if you had capital losses from last year, okay, so maybe that's good. Maybe you're managing your losses well and you carry that over. But then a lot of states don't allow that, like New Jersey, right? So what do you do there? You contact us. Why? Because together we can do stuff. Apart, we're just individuals who can make individual decisions that can, in the aggregate, have a major effect, but we can't move against an institutional machine who's just plowing forward, right? So reach out to us. Then we have a Celsius, it's called damage report available, and it goes through quantitative and qualitative suffering that you've, let's say, experienced, or a loved one of yours, let's say, that passed away since, which is a really sad thing to say, right? But we have one verified U.S. based suicide that occurred as a result of the restrictions. That we can say because it was a friend of a friend. But we have others that were wives of them, for example, submitting. So we can't verify that, or it's much more difficult to verify. And we have limited resources, and we essentially took our own funds. So we self-funded everything, right? So it's like we need to be like we don't have investigative journalists and private investigators. So it's like we can do the best we can with the resources that we have. But it's go fill out the form. So it's qualitative and quantitative. It then becomes depersoned from you. If that's what you have to opt into it, staying personal to you, attached to your person. But we go through a verification process. This information is then aggregated on the quantitative end, and then on the qualitative end, you have the opportunity to do like an interview, to submit a testimonial, etc. This, guys, like I know it's your tiers, but your tiers added into a pot of tiers is gold relative to gaining, say, leverage during the negotiation of the damages that's happened, gaining message amplification through the media, because the media can say only so many times, no, Mike, we're not going to go air it, or like they'll air something, but not air it, but they'll take they'll capture it, and then you're like, when's it going to air? They're like, we decided to talk about Kardashian instead. You're like, schmucks, you're just wasting all this time. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing, right? It then allows us to then run a harassment campaign on Twitter making them look like a bunch of a-holes, and all the only way that they can save face is by putting a small plug on. Trust me, no one gives an ish about you guys. No one gives an ish. I'm so serious. No one cares. Even your family half the time probably thinks you're a piece of ish, right? This is the truth. So if you want your stuff back, you need to fight for it. You need to get off your tush and you need to do something about it. You staying there, oh, my life savings is about to go to zero. And we're like, here, this is what you can do. Here you're like, I don't have time. Well, hey, schmuck, maybe, not worth fighting for, right? So it's just like, okay, either you take individual action, and we just gave you 3 points to do it. The fourth point is to stop the sell-off. Now, that's the most important, right? If you're an insider or, let's say, just happen to come across some of the information that we've identified and accidentally upload it through the anonymous thing, and we just so happen to receive it, it will be used to leverage to back what we believe to be the strongest and most fair depositor's first proposal. I don't care if you're custody or earnings, you're bickering. Guys, I just can't hear beyond your nonsense. Shut up. Shut up. Let the men work, right? Honestly, let the men work, right? It's like, let's get this done, because these people, like, you don't represent all the Celsius depositors. You're just a noisy bastards that made your way on Twitter, okay? It's like, let us get them their ish back as soon as possible in the most legally sound way as possible, by coordinating as opposed to trying to tear each other down, which it seems like that's all you know how to do, minus like 10 of you.
Absolutely, absolutely. What was something when you started Citizen Warrior Foundation? What was something that was really more challenging that you expected it to be? Like, did you expect something that should have happened but didn't happen your
Yeah,
way? Was there some myths around your work with Citizen Warrior Foundation that people misunderstood you with? Can you talk
of
about any
course. Yeah, there
story
was
around that?
absolutely. So I mean, a few things, and it's like we're not alone in any of this. By the way, you'll find this if you attempt to do any great endeavor, which means like just essentially an impactful endeavor, right? One that may sound grandiose, but every great idea was like, I want to do something good, and good is a very grand deal. I mean, is your 5 circles of good, right? Yourself, your family, your community, your nation state, the world over time, legacy, right? So I mean, this is grandiose by nature, by definition, right? So yeah, the first thing is that there's a saying, no good deed ever goes unpunished. Now, if you allow that to stop you from going forward, then you were never meant to succeed. So you better stop expecting schmucks online from validating you, and you should be able to take the slings and the arrows, because or else, guess what? I ain't going to support you as a leader, son. You're a little boy and you need to grow up, right? So we had that, right? But like, I love to tussle, man. I like to roll. Like, bring it on, son. I love mobs too. I mean, it's great having to deal with mobs impugning intent. But no, I mean, what we saw was a lot of theft of reputation. They're saying, listen, like, you're trying to fundraise money to start a foundation to reconcile this. Why would you start a foundation and raise money? Well, I'm like, geez, number one is that not everyone who donates wants to be listed publicly because they might want to be protecting long-term investments. That's one. Two is things cost money, capital. Like, let's say, I don't know, a lawyer, paid adverts to accelerate the message, right? Media access, okay? Basic operational overhead, right? Which we've entirely self-funded. So we lost all our money, and now we're self-funding everything because you a-holes got in the way and impugned intent, right? And it's just like, at the end of the day, it's like, if you want to know who to trust the guy who incurs maximal cost on behalf of the cause that he has a plurality of intent in terms of supporting. Like, I got effed, you got effed, I want to help us both, right? That you can trust, because it's not just like, you got effed, oh, I love you so much, let me help you. I don't like the majority of you, by the way. So what I'm saying is like, right, let me just be clear, right? I'm honest, I'm clear. But when these people had the chance to get together, especially on Twitter, we could have got Celsius out of a hole. That's how they're like 1.2 short. But because of their bickering, you guys set us back a month. We had to reorganize everything. We had to go, again, we had to go so far and beyond what we would have had to in order to safeguard Celsius. And I don't know about preventing Chapter 11. That wouldn't have happened really, because this would have been too little time to do it. But it would have been in kind of nipping it in the bud right around the time that it filed. when it still had all the criminal stuff that we could have identified and used that as leverage, and less of a spread because it kept on extracting crap and swapping out something, whatever. And it's just could have found a way out with the restructuring of management through a VC injection and like a rebranding. But because these schmucks on crypto Twitter go around and they do that to everybody, they even hate each other. Even within the same groups, they hate each other. It's just mind blowing. But it's actually not mind blowing. But that so you asked a question. You said what happened that was an impudent like early on, and it was just like we could have done it if these little boys playing men didn't get in the effing way, and because they did, everyone has to pay for it. Everyone, because the little boys with their soy lattes were trying to play men. Boys, let men do the work. Get out of the way. That's my loving message.
Absolutely, absolutely. What is the best way that people who want to support Citizen Warrior Foundation, what is the best way to show their support for you? Can you share that with our audience as well?
Very kind question. So there are four ways essentially. One is to, if you're a company, to partner with us to further our exempt purposes. Okay. So again, it was education. So that you're in emerging tech, education, community organization, relationship building, and R&D into goods and services. That's number one. Number two is volunteers. So we have a list of volunteer positions that are open. We're all unpaid volunteers. We're all working, say, 3 blocks of 4-hour focused sessions a day, 7 days a week, which means essentially like 16 hours, 17 hours a day, right? But working our very in a focused way. So it's like we're gonna keep on doing that, no matter we're just gonna keep on going, right? Like I'm gonna be killed, or I'm gonna do that until the day I die. But things will resolve itself before that. So I'm saying, like, if you want to come and you're hardcore and you want to contribute, or let's say that's too much time and you want to do some part-timey stuff because you have like a core competency that the market values and that would really help contribute to our strategy and our cause, like please reach out. All the volunteer roles are posted. That's number two. Number three, we have like what we call just like our boosters, social boosters. So because we had to start all these new native platforms, and you can see if you go to our Facebook page, that's really cool. Like, take a look. The first half, like 10,000 likes and comments stuff, right? The second half, it's like, you got like 15, something like that. That's when we stopped doing paid adverts, right? Because they took all our crap, right? So it's like, what we're trying to do right now is we have this Discord thing coming up, and we're going to eventually do some cheesy thing with the airdrop and the blah, blah, blah. But that's down the line. Like that stuff, guys, just stay away from that crap, right? So if you want to support the cause, join the what we call like the boost crew, the boost crew, something like that. Yeah, whatever it is. It's a Discord channel, and you can find us. And then the last one is we're establishing a donor network. We want people, high net worth individuals that are highly vested in emerging tech, who understand what this CFI debacle is about to do to our long-term, investments. And these are business owners as well in emerging tech looking for a valuation in 1 or 2 years once the market turns bullish. I'm speaking to you guys because if you actually want a reasonable valuation, pennies on the dollars, once we get our exemption, or if you don't mind a delayed whatever, it's like if someone does not start doing something, can we be any more evident? Voyager, Celsius Network. We'll see what happens with next. So 3 Hours Capital. Look what's happening with FTX right now. Look with the BlockFi loan. You just want to keep on going through it. Like, do you need any more proof that the ish has hit the fan, and that if you want to protect your investments or your companies, or you want to have a good valuation, you need someone tearing down the criminals and, let's say, avoiding the government boot from stomping out your innovation or bringing you into court for some kind of nonsense that they'll look at retroactively, said you're guilty, and you got to argue your way out. They're going to lawfare the hell out of you. So that's how you can help.
Absolutely, absolutely. It is honestly such an inspiring story that you have, Mike. I actually had a question while, and this is might not be relevant to what Citizen Warrior Foundation is doing, but it is something of a personal story myself.
Please.
You mentioned about Vauld, right? Vauld declaring bankruptcy as well, right? And we were also investing from India into Vauld, and a lot of our funds are also stuck, and we are kind of somewhere in the same space as you are. How do we fight against this? What is the model that we can replicate over here? Because Celsius is registered in the US, right? But in India, Vault is kind of registered in Singapore, so it's more difficult for us to do so. How do we kind of rally around this cause? What do you suggest for people who
Okay.
are
I'll
invested in
take you.
Vault? How do we kind of replicate the same model that you are fighting for with Celsius?
Let me give you play by play. So the first thing is I know people in Singapore that are the good guys, and I mean that for real. Like they are the good guys. They're OGs, and they're the good guys. They know. I mean, you take any of these Web3 kids who, by the way, are brilliant. So I'm not trying to put them down, but like these guys know the substrate of the substrate that these guys are building, right? And they know about all the shenanigans. So this is where partnership comes into play and relationship building, right? This is exactly what comes into play. We do know the model. We do know the best approach we believe, and if someone knows a better approach, critique our approach so we can improve it, right? We always welcome constructive feedback. But what you want to do is establish a medium that can have legal standing, right? That can receive capital, that can build up human capital and intellectual capital, and then connect it to a, let's say, legal representative in Singapore. That's number one. Number two, damage reports are like golden bars in that people's legitimate, meaningless suffering tears, which is a terrible thing, right? It's terrible. It's terrible. All right. But those are assets that you can build up and push away into the media. Because if you're not getting the story, if you think, like I said, no one gives an ish about you. I'm sorry. Like half your parents think that you suck, just so you know, in case you didn't know. Have your parents don't like you. Okay? So the broader public doesn't give an ish, especially because they thought you were like half of you were Bitcoin millionaires and the other half are like investing in Dogecoins, right? So anyway, the point is this, is that you have to individually make the decision to take action. Someone has to go get an institution together. I suggest somewhere where they can privately donate. I don't know how it works, right, in India. If it's called over here, it's called a 501c3, and then you can choose amongst the 501c3 and exempt purposes. But essentially, where people can donate to you, and their personhood would remain unpublic. Okay, because there's always conflicts of interest and all these different. It's just unpublic. Make it private, and establish a trustworthy legal representation. Collect those damage reports. Identify. So get a blockchain analyst on board. Get as many assets under management as they were before they restricted the withdrawals. Right. Try to find internal financials if you can. Right. When was it incorporated? How long after? You need a few blockchain analysts, financial analysts. You need access to the areas within DeFi that they were using in order to generate this yield. And then you need to have their financials to see if they were, at what point they became an illegitimate company, if that ever happened, and if there was malfeasance at play, which you'll be able to tell through having access, which requires the source documents, right? So either you go through a full legal, you have a big backer, you get legal standing, and then you subpoena the documents. That's a way. Or you encourage what we're doing, which is a crowdsourcing event so that people can anonymously contribute them. But obtain legal standing and then pursue it. And don't do it where you're pointing fingers at each other like a bunch of stupid children so nothing gets done. Find the most reputable person that you can agree upon. Like just take your leaders of, like, let's say the A group, the B group, and the C group. Get together, the leaders get together and just fight it out and determine who their Murdoch is going to be, right? So get your Murdoch together, right? Are you a good Murdoch? Yeah? Okay, good. Go for a good Murdoch. And now good Murdoch goes over to the legal rep and says, this is how we're going to do it, and then pursue it. And be relentless, right? Because no one's going to get your crap for you. No one has your interests and hearts. No one gives an ish what happens to you. And if you don't take individual action, you think someone else is going to do it for you, quite frankly, maybe you don't deserve your deposit, right? So take individual action. It happens with the sovereign individual taking action and taking accountability. The mistake was custodying it outside of cold storage. Okay, let's recognize that mistake. That's how we contributed, right? Too good to be true. That's how we contributed. Now we look to the external loci of control, and it might have been third parties outside, right, of Vauld. I don't know, right? Or it could have been the insiders. Find out. Find out. Sit around, do nothing. All right, don't expect anything. But yeah, form a partnership with us. We'll walk you through every single step, all the connections you need. That's what we do. That's what we do. That's why we're here.
Absolutely. I think this is a great approach, Mike. And I talked about this because I personally have skin in the game. A lot of my assets were seized as well. And I empathize with you when you talk about your experiences with the Celsius network, right? So, which is why your approach will be really helpful for our audience sitting here in India who has kind of invested in Vault and kind of are suffering the consequences of doing that. But thank you so much, Mike. This was a really fruitful conversation. I love the way you explained a lot of things, and I would love to talk for another hour, to be honest. But thank you so much for making emerging tech more responsible and minimizing meaningless loss, as you mentioned. And in my opinion, truly your efforts kind of have the potential to change the world of crypto and Web3 as we know it. I think no one is kind of doing the work that you do, because this is affecting the people who are believing in this space, right? And their beliefs are being tested right now. And that is what is happening. And thank you for showing people a way to kind of redeem their belief in this space, have more checks and balances, and have a better, safer crypto and a Web3 space, right? So thank you so much for sharing these insights with our audience. And I wish you and Citizen Warrior Foundation all the best with your future endeavors as well.
Thank you so much, Roy. It was a real pleasure. And if you happen to move into wanting to resolve this issue with Vault, or you find someone who is really looking forward to that, I'm happy to. I got to qualify them, vet them, and if all is good, walk them through the process and connect them with legal representation. Happy to do
Absolutely. I will take you up on that for
it.
sure.
All right.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much,
Look
Mike,
forward
for
to
your
it.
time today.